Hi and welcome to Lois and Morgana Davidson Art. It's Lois here, and spring is really coming alive here in the UK. We're having some rainy, windy, stormy weather, but between the showers we're also having some lovely sunshine that's warming up really nicely, and the flowers are starting to bloom and the tree blossom is showing. It's absolutely gorgeous. So I thought it was about time I started to do some more flower painting. So I thought I'd show you a few of the paintings that I've done over the last few months. Most of these are my own personal paintings that I've just kind of made up on the fly and not things that I could teach. If I'm going to be demonstrating here on YouTube, it has to be something that I know is repeatable even by beginners. So today we're going to be starting off with something fresh and beautiful, these wonderful foxgloves, and this lovely loose painting. If we look closely, you can see that it has some ink line work, sort of roughly and sketchily outlining the blooms, the buds and the stems. And that's how we're going to get our structure nice and fairly easily. And then we're going to introduce beautiful loose washy washes of watercolour paint to create these beautiful lovely soft loose effects. Now I think this is a really nice painting even for beginners to have a go at, and please let me know if you're interested in more flower painting. Hopefully we'll do a lot more of these throughout the coming weeks and months. We're going to be using 4 colours today, but use whichever colours you prefer. I'm using from right to left Opera Rose, Sap Green, Quinacridone Purple and just a touch of raw sienna. So here is the line work for our foxgloves. I sketched it in pencil first and then went over it with waterproof fine liner. There is an in-depth tutorial showing you how to do this on Patreon, complete with images to download, copy and refer to. So if you're interested in that, please follow the link below. Otherwise, you can pause the video here and copy it, or you can take a screenshot and then maybe download it, print it out and copy it and refer to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is lay my board at a very shallow angle, only about 10-15 degrees, because I don't need too much run of the paint today. I'm using Saunders Waterford cold pressed watercolour paper, £140 weight or 300 GSM. It's 11 inches by 15 inches or 28 centimetres by 38 centimetres, but use whatever size you're comfortable with. It's taped to my board with ordinary decorator's masking tape. So the first thing I'm going to do is use a water mister to lightly spray over my paper. The reason for this is that I want to leave some little bits randomly dry, some wet, so that this will really help me to get my lovely washy washes. So mixing up a nice sort of mid-range pigmented, mid-value of sap green, and I'm using a large synthetic mop brush. Any wash brush will do, just to dab some of that green over the areas where there are stems or buds, and then to dot some randomly around the background, just allowing the water that's on the page just to let the paint flow. Then I'm going to do exactly the same, cleaning off my brush and dipping into my Opera Rose. I'm going to do exactly the same, just dab that. I'm not painting in the lines, I'm just dabbing it in and around where there are flowers and buds. Just dotting and dabbing, slowly building up, allowing the paint to run into the water and allowing it to run into the green in places. And this way we will build up some really soft washy washes. This is a little tiny bit of raw sienna, not too much, but just enough to mix on the page with the other 2 colours so far, just to really give us that very light golden glow, sort of as a sort of almost an undertone to the pinks and greens. And it's really important to restate that I'm not painting in the lines. Part of what's going to give us the illusion of this really loose watercolour is going to be the way the paint is just sort of going in and out of the buds and the blooms. So I get soft and hard edges, I get reflected light or the suggestion of other blooms in the background just from some of the washes. So if you prefer, you can of course paint inside the lines, but it will end up looking a little bit tighter. For those who want this sort of very loose washy look, then this kind of approach, and of course tipping and tilting the board if you get the build-up of paint here and there, and then you can add some spatter. This is quinacridone purple mixed with a bit of the opera rose. You can see it's just slightly more intense than the opera rose. And again, tipping and tilting and just allowing the water to flow. And using the wet in wet method like this can be a really exciting way, but make sure you don't put too much paint on too quickly. We're working from light through to slightly darker colours, so we want to really have this lovely pale transparency to start with. And then we can start to build up the painting with some slightly darker tones and hues. So I've laid it back at the slight angle again, and I'm going to spatter some paint with my fan brush. This is a mixture of the opera rose and quin purple, and this gives me that slightly sort of darker pink. And because it's still wet in wet, everything is still blending and mixing on the page. Then I can use the fan brush just to dot in a little bit more colour, seemingly randomly, but mostly around the area where there are open buds and flowers. And you can see those areas just still softening and diffusing into the wet wash. If I feel that any of the marks have gone on a little bit too dark, of course, while it's wet, I can dab it out with a tissue. More or less anything goes, and then spattering on a little bit more, this time adding a bit more of the sap green. And because we're working wet in wet, a lot of this spatter will disappear, but some of it will leave us these really pretty little marks that just soften and diffuse and will add extra texture to our washy background. And all the time that I'm painting, of course, my painting is just slowly drying out a little bit. So now what I can do is I can just get a little bit of drier, richer paint into my flower areas. So using a medium-sized synthetic mop, I'm going to add some more of this lovely pink colour, which is a mixture of opera rose and quin purple, into the larger flower areas and just touching it into the buds here and there with the tip of the brush. This larger, richer paint will diffuse less and more or less stay where I put it, but still soften and diffuse and still give us this really loose look without any hard edges, unless it sort of hits a bit of dry paper, in which case I will get a slightly harder edge. But most of this is still soft. Most of our edges here are going to, or have already been created by the line work that we've done. The soft edges are created here, in this case, with the paint. So I suppose in a way this sort of painting is like a halfway house between a sort of a tight, detailed watercolour painting and a very, very loose painting. And it's quite a good way to get used to these techniques. You can see I'm just dotting this pink here and there as well now, and then just using the brush to pop some tone into the shapes here and there. And this is a little bit of white gouache, and again wet in wet, flicking or spattering some drops of the white gouache into the the painting here and there just adds that sort of creamy highlight sort of touch, if you see what I mean. Some of it will disappear and fade, but other parts of it will help to give this nice creamy white glow. I can, of course, and I will spatter at the end onto the dry painting, and that will give us some more obvious marks, but all this is just adding to the soft washy background. Just before it dries, I'm going to do exactly the same with the sap green as I did with the pinky violet colour. So I'm just dropping in drier, richer paint with a small round brush into the areas around the stem and the joins where the buds join and the buds themselves. And this stronger, richer, drier paint will pretty much stay put, but will soften and diffuse, but help to distinguish the greener parts of our plants from the flowers. So now I need to leave it to dry completely, and then we can come back and add some finishing touches. So here it is, it's dry and it's looking really pretty, really delicate and light. And now some finishing touches using my fan brush and just knocking the fan brush with an inky consistency mixtures of our paint and spattering across the painting to leave these little tiny droplets, tiny marks, and this just pulls the painting together and adds that really fresh, loose look to it. You can, of course, do as much or as little spattering as you like, or just leave the spattering out if you don't like it. But I think it's got a lovely way of bringing a loose painting together and adding that extra texture. And this is my white gouache finally, putting on a few drops of that, and that will just add those highlights. And I think with foxgloves that this speckled effect from the spatter really helps to highlight the speckled pattern on the inside of those beautiful bell-shaped flowers. Once the spattering is completely dry, then we can remove the tape and have a look and see how it looks with its nice clean white border. This helps us to sort of see the painting with fresh eyes. It looks somehow more complete, and to decide whether or not we want to add any more to it. But I'm really pleased with it as it is. I think as the first flower painting for this year, I think it's really pretty. It's really loose and very delicate. It's got this beautiful spring green that we've got from just using the sap green here. And Opera Rose and Quin Purple together have delivered such a lovely range of subtle but glorious pinks. So I hope you'll give something like this a go, and if you are interested in watching the in-depth tutorial, then please follow the link below to my Patreon page. So thank you so much for watching. Please leave us a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And thank you so much to everyone who supports us on Patreon. We really appreciate every single one of you. So I'll see you soon. Take care and happy painting. Bye.